In this country, we've never had a Stasi. In this country, I think we've always looked on in horror at police states with informants that snitch on their neighbours. And in this country, I think we've always cherished the desire to do right by your family, to do right by your nearest and dearest. That's why I am, frankly, stunned and sickened by the abuse, the venom and the vitriol that I think is a sign of just how far we've fallen from valuing our freedom and our liberty. I'm talking about the police investigation into the TV and radio presenter Amanda Holden. Now, Holden has been reported to the cops for travelling 215 miles from her home to her parents' house in Cornwall after she, and this is according to the Sun newspaper, she received a call which reportedly greatly distressed her from her stepdad, Leslie, who, by the way, is climbing towards his late 70s. Now, it sounds like she dashed home last minute with only an overnight bag to ensure that her mother and her stepfather were in good health. And her parents, by the way, are vaccinated, with Holden herself receiving weekly COVID tests so she can access the studio that she works at and all the rest of it. Now, she reportedly hadn't seen her mother and stepdad for a year. And what's shocking to me is just how the Cornish curtain twitchers, how quickly they shocked Holden and their elderly neighbours in. Where's the compassion for their elderly fellow villagers? Holden seems to have gone from being a celebrity face that would visit the community in normal times to being a celebrity vector of the virus that's travelled from London and risks infecting them all. What have we descended into as far as our friends and neighbours becoming, I guess, people that we willingly rat on? I mean, have we all lost our minds? Have we forgotten our shared humanity, for goodness sake? This was a woman making a 215-mile journey for one night to ensure that her elderly mother and stepfather were cared for. And I reckon if you are someone who says that they wouldn't, after receiving a distressing call from your nearest and dearest, jump into your car to ensure all was well with them, then might I suggest that that says a lot more about you than it does about Amanda Holden. I think this really does speak volumes as to what the illiberal lockdown, the rot of that lockdown, is eating away at the very heart of the values that we've just tossed aside in pursuit of a strategy to combat one disease. You're cruelly tossing aside with sort of gay abandon those suffering from heart disease, cancers and mental health struggles. All, by the way, whilst politicians preach from the gospel of giving mental health parity with that of physical health, whilst enforcing de facto house arrest that serves only to exacerbate everything from anxieties to depression to much all else. And I think in years to come, folks, when we actually look back on how we've reacted to this crisis, I actually hope that we're ashamed of ourselves. I hope we're sorry if we are those who shopped in our neighbours so gleefully and willfully, who were concerned for their loved ones. I hope that we're ashamed of how we brushed aside the education and welfare of our children by dismissing them as merely being super spreaders, as if they're nothing more than vectors of the virus, instead of those whose education and welfare we should care really, I think, more, fervently about. I hope we'll be ashamed by the economic scarring that's blighting their futures to combat a virus that we will, in the not too distant future, I think, have learned to live with all along, or learned that we must. live with all along, or should have lived with all along, in much the same way that we've learned to live with flu. Right up until COVID, a severe flu outbreak back in January 2000, for example, filled every ICU bed in London, but there were no stay-at-home orders, there was no mass panic, there was no hysteria or the shopping in and curtain twitching to catch our neighbours being cared for by their celebrity daughters. It's at a time as well, of course, when cancellations are issued daily for the sending of a tweet, when we can't even rush to care for our parents who we haven't seen for a year, when we seem to be begging the state to absolve us of our personal responsibility to actually manage our own risk, decide our own risk and our own risk to others. I fear, folks, that the slippery slope to actually losing our freedoms and liberties that we used to value has never ever looked more uncertain.